My top 5 television shows are as follows: Lost, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Broadchurch, and The Ricky Gervais Show. I've released quite an extensive video on Lost, with others coming down the pipe. I've discussed Better Call Saul at length at this point, though I have yet to touch on the other trio of shows within my top 5. Today I'm going to be talking about the brilliant, intense, visceral, technically stunning Breaking Bad. This practically perfect series contains a cast of wonderfully realized characters, all of them portrayed by unfathomably talented actors. Bryan Cranston delivers probably the greatest performance in television history. Walter White / Heisenberg experiences such a captivating and seismic transformation. We see him completely organically go from a timid, kind of pathetic pushover in the early going of the pilot to a despicable, nefarious murderer kingpin in the show's final season. Aaron Paul is fucking glorious in his portrayal of the now iconic Jesse Pinkman. The character endures such an arduous physical and emotional journey. He morphs from a humorous punk to an extremely grizzled and jaded and resourceful badass. Paul particularly shines when delivering powerful monologues, 2 of them whilst broken and bruised in a hospital bed in episode 307, 1 minute, another whilst venting about his grave sins at his support group in episode 407, Problem Dog. Giancarlo Esposito is an absolute force of nature in this role. His every moment on screen is hypnotic and so specific and calculated. The duality of Gustavo's personality, depending on who is in his company, is utterly fascinating. He can be both seemingly friendly, kind, and professional, as well as ruthless, terrifying, and in a plethora of instances, incredibly badass. Gus's chess match with Walt through season 4 is one of the show's greatest runs of episodes. Mike Ehrmantraut was a wonderful character addition back in season 2. He is impossibly cool with an imposing presence, but when it comes to family, he's a softie with a heart of gold. Dean Norris gives what quickly turns into a very layered and complex performance in the role of Hank Schrader, the character experiencing a truly compelling evolution. Although entertaining as hell in the show's beginnings, he is also quite obnoxious and crass. Fast forward to the second half of season 4, and Hank is more so quietly intelligent and strong, far more poised than when we first met him. Now, this next character-centric topic is entitled In Defense of Skyler White. I've always felt that Skyler gets an undeserved amount of hate. Is she a top 10 favorite character of mine? No, but the series is overflowing with fascinating, excellently constructed characters, so there is an abundance of great ones outside my top 10. And sure, there are times when I get irritated by her, but given that conflict is at the core of compelling storytelling, she at times serves as a roadblock in the way of our main character. And in the show's beginnings, Walt is a guy for whom you root. So I suppose it's easy for some to have a smidgen of an inherent dislike toward those that oppose him, but when it comes to characters, greatness is not measured on a scale of lovability or how badly I want to be in their company. A great character is a created being that is well realized and authentic, brilliantly performed, well written and directed, as well as interestingly layered and complex. And Skyler White, portrayed by the mega talent that is Anna Gunn, undeniably fits that bill. We view Skyler's entire being transform as she endures a laborious emotional journey, which is simply compelling to watch. I admittedly roll my eyes when I hear individuals state vehemently and with anger towards Skyler that not only did she cheat on Walt, she betrayed him. One must remind oneself that prior to Skyler deciding to sleep with Ted Beneke, who is unquestionably a half-wit, the following occurs. Walt is completely and utterly dishonest about essentially everything with Skyler for 2 full seasons. Walt having told such a vast quantity of lies that he admittedly can no longer keep them straight in his head throughout those 2 seasons of lies. Skyler is, of course, forced to constantly wonder what Walt could possibly be hiding. Walt keeps her so distantly out of the loop that Skyler, at least for some time, believes that Walt could potentially be cheating on her. Skyler revealed to Walt in episode 213 what she had to endure in regards to calls with Walt's mother and meetings with Gretchen Schwartz in order to ultimately disprove his lies. Not to mention the emotional torment Skyler was forced to go through due to Walt's bullshit conjured up fugue state. We watch as Skyler puts up a tremendous amount of missing posters, and when she's finally reunited with her lying husband, she is exceedingly emotional. So clearly she was scared for his life. So after all of that Skylar completely understandably wants to divorce Walt, and Walt simply stubbornly refuses. He is now admitted to Skylar only because he had already slipped up and been called out, that he is a meth manufacturer, and now states to her that he is basically forcing her to remain married to him, while she also must keep her mouth shut about Walt's illegal activity. So Skylar, who is completely finished with Walt and resents him immensely, wants to do something to, at the very least, upset him. What, was she meant to obey and remain his hostage? Yeah, that would be a really interesting character with a tremendous amount of agency. In season 1, Skylar is strong-willed and confident in her beliefs, but a bit of a Karen with a hard-on for the rules and legality. Fast forward to seasons 3 through 4, and Skylar is reluctantly the Bonnie to Walt's Clyde. Then in the final season of Breaking Bad, Skylar is a broken and exceedingly jaded individual, a shell of her former self. This brilliantly constructed character, as I have made clear, goes through, like her husband, a seismic transformation, and that is one of the elements that makes Skylar White a great creation. Anna Gunn is spectacular in the role of the complex and intriguing Skylar, and for those that glared at her with gritted teeth while she was calling out Walt's laundry list of fibs in the season 2 finale, the same demographic who is rooting for the fucking evil Walt in the show's final season, I'm a bit speechless. Nothing much to say in that regard. Now I'm going to delve into Breaking Bad's greatest episodes and moments. And like my Lost review, I'm going to bounce back and forth between episodes and moments when necessary, so that I can discuss the show's highlights chronologically. These openings are so unique and jarring in a good way. They create great tension and really give season 2 its own identity, in part due to the wicked and distinct visuals. The concept is what is most brilliant of all. It's like the antithesis of the Deus Ex Machina, which is, if you're unaware, a plot device whereby a seemingly unsolvable problem in a story is suddenly or abruptly resolved by an unexpected and unlikely occurrence. We've got this season-long black and white mystery that is finally solved with what feels like an unforeseen shock in the season 2 finale plane crash, but this disastrous event was actually cleverly spelled out in the episode titles, in which these intros are featured all along. 737, Down, Over, ABQ. This episode is utterly enthralling. It's got the energy of a season finale. I mean, the first season took place amidst the writer's strike, so it's very much a possibility that the events of this episode were initially meant to take place at the shortened season 1's end, as it features a sense of perpetual intensity and heart-racing high stakes. Hank is a complete badass in the episode's final moments as he blows Tuco's brains out, though Tuco himself, portrayed by the great Ray Cruz, truly steals the show with his unhinged performance. We also get the introduction of Don Hector Salamanca, portrayed by the magnificent Mark Margolis. Hector's now iconic bell and general silent presence is geniusly and cleverly utilized in the intense narrative of this episode. This episode is fucking phenomenal. Jesse's pair of brilliantly performed monologues, to which I referred earlier, one of them depicted almost entirely in one take, as Jesse threatens to essentially destroy Hank's life and use Walt as a scapegoat. The other focused on the fact that Jesse has lost practically everything in his life ever since Walt entered it, are so masterfully written, while Hank versus Marco and Lionel is one of the show's most heart-pumping, utterly visceral, action-packed scenes, and the disguised warning call that precedes it is chilling. This entire scene features exquisite filmmaking. The lead-up to the scene's climax is so tense, while the climax itself is brutal and jaw-dropping and evidently traumatizing for our dynamic duo. Esposito commands the screen whilst only speaking a handful, if that, of words. This sensational episode greatly deepens the lore of the series, as we're witness to the birth of the great Gus-Hector rivalry. Esposito delivers an Emmy-worthy performance, showcasing an incredibly vulnerable side of Gus we had never before seen. Don Eladio is also fucking stunning and memorable in his debut. This episode is a spectacular follow-up to Hermanos, in which Stephen Bauer and Giancarlo Esposito once again deliver truly phenomenal performances. This episode is, simply put, masterful television. Practically the entirety of the episode's runtime is filled with effective tension, whilst the cinematography is impeccably cinematic. The fact that Eladio's swimming pool is such a prevalent component of this set piece is incredibly effective, as the scenes in which it is featured have these perpetually unsettling undertones, as the close-up in episode 408 of the blood of Gustavo's late partner Max dripping into the water was such a pertinent and impactful shot. You as an audience member are constantly cognizant of that horrific moment at poolside, as is Gus, of course, who is forced to stare the most traumatic moment of his life in the face. Even though Gus is a monster, it's definitely satisfying to see him get revenge on Eladio. It's certainly thrilling, and it is artistic perfection that Eladio falls dead into the pool in which Gus's deceased partner's blood once dripped. Bryan Cranston is a master of acting. This may have been my most personally visceral, jaw-dropping experience watching a television actor perform. The moment is also subtly scored, but it instinctively forces one's heart to race. A distraught Skylar listening to a combination of Walt's maniacal laughter and a terrified in regards to Hank's well-being Marie over the phone is so overwhelming in the utmost impactful way. In a sense, this moment in which Walt essentially snaps in the crawl space is the same moment in which Walt figuratively dies, and only Heisenberg remains. You are instantly dropped into the action in this immensely engrossing finale. Walt's checkmate move in this season-long chess match between he and Gus is genius. The explosion and Gus's aftermath is simply shocking and memorable. The music in the moments in which Gus approaches Hector's nursing home, as well as the episode's final moments, is beautiful. It really enhances the already exceptional material. And one single shot, the episode's final one, in fact, instantaneously deepens and darkens the now undeniably nefarious Walt. This moment is a monumentally revelatory one, packed within the utmost subtle one. It also includes a callback to the brilliant season 4 moment in which Hank jokingly states Walt to be Heisenberg, based off of this same piece of literary evidence. This is perhaps the longest anticipated moment of the series, the confrontation between Walt and Hank, once the latter has finally discovered the former's exceedingly deep, dark secret, and it is truly perfectly executed, particularly in regards to the expertly written, detailed dialogue and phenomenally performed by Dean Norris, whose close-ups feature him in moments in which he is seething, as well as moments in which he is horrified and perplexed, as well as the perpetually great Bryan Cranston. This episode, directed by the great Rian Johnson and widely considered to be the show's best, is overflowing with sensational performances and gut-wrenching story beats. The first act or so alone is emotionally exhausting, as we're witness to Hank's tragic death, Jesse being captured by the Nazis, as well as Walt heartlessly rubbing Jane's death in Jesse's face. The episode's greatest moment comes in the form of the "We're a Family" scene. It's conceptually brilliant, given that in the show's beginnings, family was the entire driving factor for Walt's monetarily beneficial illegalities. Then in the middle of the series, the selfish and verging on morally bankrupt Walt often states that family remains to be his sole motivating factor, but you as a viewer can feel that the statement holds less and less water the more it's said. After Walt and Skylar get into an intense physical fight involving a knife and Ozymandias, Walt Jr. steps in and shields Skylar from Walt. This is when Walt ragefully yells, "What the hell is wrong with you? We're a family." Then a beat of silence as the camera slowly pulls away from a terrified Walt Jr. and Skylar. A distraught Walt then says it quietly, "We're a family." He says it so desperately, as if to try and convince himself that that remains to be the case. This scene is utterly intense, fantastically shot, and we get beautiful, visceral performances from Cranston, Gunn, and Mitty. Firstly, I love the scene conceptually. Walt now feels completely disconnected from Flynn, the only family he thought he had left, so he is prepared to turn himself in, as Walt's biggest character flaw, pride, is reignited by Gretchen and Elliot Schwartz, as they appear on television discussing their ex-business partner. This beautifully fitting story beat is simply genius, and it cleverly brings this story full circle in a really organic way, as Gretchen and Elliot haven't been involved in the show for multiple seasons at this point, though they were always so prevalent to the foundation of the show, really, but primarily prevalent to the foundation of Walt as a character. They are unintentionally a primary catalyst for Walt's delusional sense of pride and repressed rage. Another wicked and unique aspect of this eventful scene is that the latter portion of it slickly incorporates the show's opening theme, this being the one and only instance in the series when that occurs.